now. Just as so we are prepared to take the praise, we must be prepared to take the responsibility. And we do not believe that anyone deliberately did anything. But leadership requires that when we make decisions, even with the best of intentions, and things go not the way that we want, we must put up our hands. And that, to me, is sadly lacking. I have listened to the pronouncements of our leaders, the same people that we have praised and we must continue to praise. Because in leadership roles, you do make mistakes. Because it is about managing a risk. So the same leadership that we praise, and I'll continue to praise, when I listen to them, passing the blame on the workers, passing the blame on the population for not wearing masks, saying that we need to follow, and implying that this may have come about because people didn't follow the proper protocol. We are asking, and yes, I speak specifically of the program that I heard 2 nights ago, when, for instance, it had been said that calls were made to the Ministry of Health to come to do some checks. When, for instance, we were saying that we normally do spot checks. I'm saying the message needs to be consistent. We will understand, I am sure, that the population of Grenada, all of us, will understand that with fighting COVID and managing the economics and the health, and we cannot remain locked down forever, let me say. We cannot remain locked down forever. But there are certain procedures that we need to follow, and we need to insist, and especially when we know that we have people coming in from certain areas. It therefore means that the aspect of monitoring must be more intense. Yes? So it behoves us to take responsibility and to come clean and point out what we intend to do about mitigating that. Because as we speak, not just myself, we have spoken, colleagues, to you, Mr. Deputy President, of the fact that in this room, there are 8 of us, 7 senators, and the clerk from St. Andrew. We are concerned about the whole of Grenada, but I'm specifically addressing that. We have relatives in the Holy Innocent Anglican School, where some of us went. We have relatives in Post Royal, and normally we do not identify the locations. But I found it strange and interesting that the media and others have gone and identified and focused and brought attention to the Holy Innocent School, the kids that are going there, and to Post Royal, the people that live there. And to compound it, I'm relating it to the budget, and I'll tell you why. Because you see, what is important is the aspect of buy-in, the aspect of understanding that in this period that the budget is designed to address the challenges of COVID, the psychological impact that dear Senator Tessa was speaking to yesterday. All these are related. So, for instance, when our locals return to Grenada and break the protocols by leaving the quarantine stations, whether it is through misunderstanding or not, our health officials and our minister goes after them. But when it is pointed out that other individuals who may have a different status in our society deliberately breaks the protocol by visiting other restaurants, etc., there is an airy silence. We have to get out of this. And therefore, I want to once again extend our empathy to the workers of Sandals and all who have been impacted. And we give our commitment to work along with all who are involved to see what we can do to mitigate any problems that may arise. And to use the same opportunity to call upon all of us to continue observing the protocol, and wherever there are loopholes, that the state and the authorities must take responsibility and put better systems in place. Mr. Deputy President, before I go into specifically looking at the budget, because I respect my colleague on the other side so much, and as a senator and a youth that I have tremendous respect for, I want to congratulate Senator Judd Cadet on his presentation. I do not have to agree with everything that he has said. I want to make the point. I do not agree with everything that you have said, but that's okay. That's not for me to do. But I want to compliment you. And because of that respect I have for you, before I go full-time headlong into the budget, I must answer a request that you made of me. You requested of me to ensure that children are allowed to see intercall and get teachers to do the intercall. You made that request, so I want to answer. Teachers have never prevented intercall, and I will never prevent intercall. And the teachers and workers are always interested, as they have done over all the years, at the forefront of intercall. And it's very simple. So through you, Mr. Deputy President, and alongside my colleague, I would like to ask you to give him the message for me that once the docked salaries are returned to teachers, they will go and continue the extra mile that they have always done, that they are doing right now. But as it relates to the other aspect, that will be done. So I've answered you, my colleague, because of my respect to you. Going in full-time into the budget, I must be brutally frank and indicate that in our review and my review of the budget, I did not get the sense that it was a budget with a difference. I formed the view that it was similar to the other budgets. And through you, Mr. Deputy President, here I want to agree with Senator Cox, but to conclude differently. What you have hit the nail on the head. What is required is visionary and focused leadership. The challenges that we are faced on, I am sure that we can get our people to understand the sacrifices that are required, as we have always done. But the leadership that is required cannot be like yesterday. There's an emergency, there's an urgency. It must also be noted that for the very first time in quite a while, the TUC was not involved in budget consultation. Yes, we were involved in the broader discussions, but the tradition of where we were engaged, where we had a 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour session, where we can go into, as we say, the nitty-gritty with the Ministry of Finance, that was denied of us, although it was planned. And my investigation have shown that a number of other groups may have suffered the same fate. And the question would arise, why? I do not have the answer, but I leave that outside there. Yes? We found it very strange that in a period now of where you need more consultation, there were less consultation with the labor movement. Mr. Deputy President, while listening to the presentation and discussions in that other place, and while listening to the discussions from ministers on other different forums, I genuinely wondered whether or not there was a change in government. And the reason I wondered, it is because, and then I realized, no, probably it has to do with the reshuffling. The way I heard ministers correctly identify the problems that were existing and they intend to fix, I'm like, but isn't there a collective cabinet? And the knocking of the tables by colleagues in agreement with the observations made about the existing problems and what needs to be done. I wondered if there was a change in administration, and as though people were not aware. And therefore, it is in the same context. When I heard the pronouncement on the Marketing and National Importing Board, very, very important institution in our country that I will spend some time on. And I want to congratulate my colleague, friend, and brother. We grew up together for his contributions from agriculture in relation to MNIB. The comment which says that Marketing Board has lost its ways. The comment which says that Marketing Board has drifted away from the dreams of the founding fathers. And let me tell you, the founding fathers are not 200 years ago. I am not afraid to say that the founding fathers of the Grenada Revolution, I am not afraid to say that the founding fathers are Corporal Maurice Bishop and Bernard Code and others. When our citizens and our young ones listen to the terminology of founding fathers and Marketing Board, it may sound as though this is something that happened 200 years ago. But the vision and aspiration and dreams were only about 40 years ago. This also played into the hand, the question that crossed my mind. And because we have a role and function and duty in this place to address issues that will allow us to look at them objectively, because we sit on different sides, I asked myself the question, where were you all these years? And we know the problems that existed in Marketing Board before and still exist. We do not want to see Marketing Board fail. Marketing Board have that role to take agriculture, not the traditional agriculture, on the way forward in terms of getting prices, market, fixed markets, etc. And I can discuss at some other time some of the ways and means that we can get our people to eat local and buy local by going through Marketing Board. Coming out to address some of the issues in the budget, under the Ministry of Labor, the TUC wants to see significant increases in its resources in relation to the human resource. If we agree, and I know we all agree, that some of the challenges that is as a direct result of the economic challenges brought on by COVID will be the aspect of industrial relations. And therefore, there'll be a higher demand on the resources of the Ministry of Labor. So, for instance, at the moment, there is no Deputy Labor Commissioner. At the moment, they need other officers. And I know I've seen a provision that would says for 9 months, but I've seen that happen before. I've seen pronouncements or indications to staff the Ministry of Labor. But that is not happening. So I'm making that urgent appeal. The TUC is making that urgent appeal because it will help in managing industrial relations issues that will arise. And more so for the ununionized workplaces. We are confident that had the Sandals workers not been intimidated, and I speak with absolute authority on this, from joining unions, that we would have had a better role to play in trying. We may not have been able to prevent it. That's not the point I'm making. The question that has arisen is whether or not enough efforts were made. And I'm saying with the union present, as we have seen in the other workplaces that we are aware of, how we are able to intervene to help manage the aspect of COVID, the Sandals workers would have been able to enjoy this. In the Ministry of Labor, we want to see the aspect of the Wages Advisory Board. We know a decision has been made to put that on hold because of the problems that we have now with finance. But there are other aspects that can be addressed, because in the existing minimum wage order, you have wages based on geography. So if I'm a baker and you're a baker, or I am a clerk and you're a clerk, but I'm working in St. George and you're working in St. Patrick, the wage in St. Patrick is lower than St. George. That can't make much sense. No, we are all part of those decisions before, understanding how the tripartite arrangement works. But even in this period, while the aspect of wages are creating some discussions, there are other issues that can't be addressed, and therefore this needs to be done. If we go to the budget statement, page 6, 2.2.4, under unemployment and social dislocation, an observation is that under quarter 4 in 2019, unemployment stood at 15.1. I'm using the official data that has been given. I'm not saying whether I believe it was 15%. It is now in quarter 2 in 2020, 28.4%. I'm not saying I accept that. It can be much more, but I'm using the official data. After 6 months, it has almost doubled. And we understand that it is because of COVID. Bearing in mind that the implications or the impact of COVID came about in March, end of February, March. So you're talking about unemployment doubling within probably a 3-month period. We all know that that has been significantly driven by the tourism industry. And that must tell us about the fickle nature of tourism. I'm not against tourism. But resilience requires us to address the areas that can be able to withstand external and internal shock. Because we know what the external shocks are, but you can have internal shocks. Hurricanes, fire, and as we say fire, I am glad to hear Senator Cox indicate that the fire service, at least, there will be the maintenance of the presence of the fire trucks and other services in the town of St. George. For a moment, I was wondering whether or not much spoke about relocation to the south had to do with the potential for, figuratively speaking, fire in the south. And if my brother have the control of the fire engine, he can control the fire. My brother, I wish you all the best. I know, I understand that. Yes, I understand that. I understand that. If we go to page 1371, revenue measures, collection of tax arrears, we want to know what type of taxes have the greatest percentage of arrears. If it turns out to be that VAT is significant among them, we would like to know why were entities allowed to hold on to the money, because we know of the recent, not too long ago, issue with one of our leading supermarket chains. Yes? I'm aware that one of the great legacies of the VAT has to do with the restructuring of the IRD and the Customs Department. But yet still, given the important role of the IRD department, we have lost over 4 controllers between the period 2012 to 2016. This is not good for stability. And make it worse, in the Ministry of Finance, we have had a high turnover rate of permanent secretaries. Given the important role that this ministry plays, and that is what I'm saying, we need to address those matters with a sense of urgency, because this is not business as usual. Therefore, we want to commend the workers in the IRD and Customs Department. The TUC is also looking forward to the revision of some of the services and fees to the inclusion of abolishing some of those fees. I think that there is something, for instance, as a latrine tax or a latrine fee that may be on the books. And I know that there have been, and I'm using this as an example, we have been speaking for the longest while of cleaning up these things. It is felt that the administrative cost on these are much more than what you'll collect. So it's in this context we speak. Okay. I know you had a purpose for coming back here. No? Yes. On the current expenditure side, the intention is to spend almost the same amount as approved in 2020. And this is in a period of unprecedented challenges. As it relates to the freezing of position, we would like to know what those positions, the positions that are to be frozen. A look through the budget may not necessarily always explain what positions are to be frozen. On the revenue, since 2014, our current revenues has been between 21 and 24% of GDP. Current account surplus have been trending in the right direction. And if we look on the document is there, revenue to GDP ratio, expenditure to GDP ratio, current account surplus, we will see this. Data is indicating that fiscally, the picture is not that dull, even as we deal with COVID. I'm using this data here. The leadership, well, I've already congratulated the workers and the leadership at the IRD department. Public workers' wages, page 14 of the budget speech. And permit me to quote, to read verbatim. I hope I wrote it down right. Government has made an appeal to the public sector, and that's the Minister of Finance speaking here. Government has made an appeal to public sector trade unions regarding a deferral of negotiated salary increases for 2021, estimated to add 13.4 million to the wage bill. End of quote. I would like to answer with a quote. The law of sowing and reaping clearly indicates that the government cannot expect to plant the seeds of contempt and vindictiveness and reap the fruits of cooperation and goodwill. End of quote. Comrade Marvin Andal, President General, Grenada Union of Teachers, November 30th, 2020. Sure. However, assuming that government did not budget to pay the 13.4 million, so, they will project a current account surplus of $45.5 million. So if you take away $13.4 million from the $45.6 million, there is still $32.1 million. That's under the current account surplus. Although I am assuming that they did not budget for the 13.4 million, although a closer examination on page 160 of the estimates of revenue and expenditure, that is under vote 14, a sample have shown that there is a movement in some estimated projected salaries by something close to 4%. I'm not saying in all cases. But even if they didn't, and we will expect them to budget for this, because that's a prudent thing to do. You have a signed collective agreement. This is not the MOU that we had signed, and some people argue and say an MOU is not as strong as a collective agreement, which is a different discussion. But there's a legal obligation for the 4%. And therefore, even if you are in discussion to try to get some consideration, prudent financial management will have you make allocations for it. Nonetheless, I challenge the government to prove that 13.4 million, to prove it, since there maybe are a number of positions within the sector that may not be filled, and you still make allocations for it. So we challenge that. We like to see this. But more than that, even from an economic, and I'm not an economist, I've been trying to learn from some of the pronouncements made by my colleagues, especially on the other side. If we agree that an increase in the ability to spend or consume is important for economic activities, it must mean that putting the $13.4 million in the hands of teachers and other public officers is the best thing for the economy at the moment. Because, remember, we are not into saving, the vast majority of us. So these monies, but what will be important, and that is where agriculture comes in. We need to ensure that we have more local stuff to consume, because as my colleague, Senator Cox, mentioned this morning, as he spoke about construction and the economic activities, by the importation of materials, what he may not have recognized at the same time is that that will lead to higher leakages. Because even if we are spending more, because we are importing, more money is going out. And that is the context in which we speak about the importance of agriculture now, over tourism and over construction. We are not saying to give up on any, and that is where marketing board comes in. So this is the point here. We say the economy needs consumers to spend, and therefore with 4% more in the public officer's pocket, they'll be able to spend more, especially in the context where in some household, other people in the private sector may have lost their jobs. Yes? So we are, as we have said, we look forward to the dock salaries that were taken. Labour is also requesting a breakdown of the salaries and wages composition of the entire public service. To help us in some of our discussions, is a requirement that we have made in the past and we have made in other forums. We would like to see that breakdown. There's another issue I want to address frontally. The issue of productivity and across the board increases and performance. Just as how an investor is proud to announce that they are looking to make profits on the investment, and there ain't anything wrong with that. We must not be ashamed or afraid to put our hands up and say, yes, we go to work to get paid. The employer invests to get a profit, we go to work to get paid. And in achieving both, that's where the issue of productivity and other things come into play, and that's where the discussion ought to be on. And we are prepared. I look forward to a discussion on the question of productivity. Across the board increases, we have no apologies for the following. Our objective is to ensure that we can maintain and improve the living standard of our people. Now, if an entity cannot afford to pay, that's a different discussion. And we have demonstrated that. In the public sector, we have taken 0% increases a number of times. In the private sector, we have done likewise. So we look forward to these discussions. We also would like to know what of the surpluses experiences of the last 3 years, of the surpluses experience, what has they been used for? The reason I'm asking that, because if it was used for debt repayment, or if the answer is for debt repayment, we thought that debt repayment were budgeted for. So if you budget for debt repayment and you end up with surpluses, it will mean that you have met some of that payment. So without having the answer, we're asking for some of these things. Yes? If we go to budget statement, page 16, allocation, Mr. Deputy President, when we look at the allocations, we say up front that these millions look really good. But we would like to know what percentage are for administrative costs. Because to understand the input or the significance for the different allocations, it would be important. So for example, under the Ministry of Infrastructure, as the number one of the top 10, government expect to spend 133.7 million. We would like to know what percentage is for administrative costs. Under the Ministry of Education, number 2 of the top 10, the same question applies, etc. If we go to page 34, and I'm speaking here of the budget statement, yes? On the health. Before I go into some of this, last year when I stood here, I raised a number of concerns about Ministry of Health and in particular the hospital. We still have a number of those concerns. But I want to place on record the following. Because just as how I accepted and I know the information that I had last year was correct, I want to address the following. And I want to read it as I wrote it. Mr. Deputy President, during last year's budget debate, I zeroed in on the Ministry of Health relative to the hospital. Today, I take this opportunity to praise the newly appointed Minister for Hospital Services, Honorable Delma Thomas. I have gotten reports from highly credible sources that she has already started to make a difference. Key among her approach is that she's on the ground. She's listening. And to you, Mr. Deputy President, Senator Judd, she has a good heart. She has a good heart. And I want to personally wish her all the best. At the same time, to call upon her to use her good offices to get the scores of workers who have been working for 10, 15 and more years without a permanent appointment, to get them appointed. I use that opportunity to call upon her. Under that same, on page 476 now of the revenue and expenditure estimates, we have seen that hospital stay is projected to move from 5 days in 2019, there's no information for 2020, to 6 days in 2021. We would like to know what's the reason for that. We are also concerned about the freezing of position, because given the important role that health has to play in this period, and given the fact that we are looking to spend as much as or more than last year, it is important to have the necessary human resources, taking into account that implementation has been one of the challenges that we have had in the past. I want to put on the table and make a specific request, and the labor movement will also take the lead in that, because we have specific interests. And through you, Mr. Deputy President, the private sector and the government, and something that health could take the lead. The aspect of vaccination for COVID-19 is right on our doorstep now, more than 3 or 4 months ago, when there was debate as to whether or not it will come in 1 year, 2 years. We need a national conversation on the vaccine. And I can tell you that as I speak, on Friday, UE will be conducting a debate, a discussion on the vaccine. And I think it is necessary for we to do this, because there will be all kinds of different challenges. What if someone does not want to take it? So we need to address those issues. How would workers be impacted? How would employers respond? Who themselves are individuals? We need that national conversation, early o'clock, so that we can have an understanding. At the same time, under youth development, I heard from on the other side speaking about the Imani program. It's something that the labor movement has always spoken about and asked for it to be revamped. I am happy now that the new minister, or the recent minister of youth, yes, at the highest level, at the level of the Prime Minister, have identified that there's need for an organized exit strategy. The question that would arise, and we must ask that question, because it was one of the flagship programs that started before 2008. I think it was the NNP that started it. Yes? What has been happening over the years when we have been speaking about it? It must not take the youth to just rebel, or, yes, to cause a significant input by trying to wrestle with the program now. Okay, the question will arise. The fact that it is admitted that there needs to be an exit strategy must be an acceptance that there was a fundamental problem. And we have spoken about that many times. Please, colleagues, when we stay in this house, when we make different interventions, do not take it as just being anti the government or anti the administration or anti-progress. It is about us. It is about Grenada. And I do not know what this says for the previous ministers of youth and others, that the Prime Minister has to make that intervention. But that's a matter for them to address. I wish the youth all the best, because that's where the future lies. And if you permit me, on this matter, I would just want to, because I agree, the TUC agrees, that the youth have an extremely important role to play. And I want to borrow from a presentation made by a leading national out of Grenada, who did a presentation to the Communal Credit Union that I think many of us should try to listen to. Sometime, I think, in June, July, August, thereabouts. I want to refer to one page here, and I'm giving credit to Dr. Earl Braffett. In that discussion, and we can look at that through TAMCC, the aspect of TAMCC, recognizing that TAMCC, 1% of our population is being matriculated each year, and that's the work of Dr. Braffett. So it's not me, but it's not about me, it's about us. There's no better way to impact the workforce and develop intellectual capital than by investing in TAMCC. I'm not calling the government to let us focus on this, where we can upgrade TAMCC as a premier institution in the region, where we can develop on our nursing facilities to TAMCC and SGO. And the aspect of scholarships, to ensure that we target scholarships, for instance, with software, India, agriculture, Israel, as some examples. And that will lead us back, that's the end of what I'm using here. That will lead us back to the discussion on scholarships that we both correctly so are giving out hundreds of scholarships, but are they targeted? And what we want to see coming out in this period, COVID has not brought anything new to us, you know. COVID has just exposed the problems that we have, and it has given us an opportunity to make changes so that when we are given scholarship, if we agree, and I'm saying we, if government, us, Grenada, agrees that we need to invest in agriculture, in agro-industries, for instance, or tourism, right? I disagree that that should not be the main focus. It should be a focus, but not the main focus in this period. But if that's where the government is going, and you identify that you want to go into diving, for instance, identify credible institutions and go into an arrangement with 10, 15 people, give them scholarship to do diving, and then they can come back and contribute to the society. That's the point that we are making. So whatever area, Mr. Deputy President, that we agree on, and it's not our ultimate decision. The government is there to make certain decisions. Ultimately, the cabinet will decide. And I respect that. I can disagree, and that's okay. But anything that we in the labor movement can do with any decision that you make, once it is in the interest of the country, we will give our support. We'll criticize where there's need to criticize, because that's important. But we will do nothing to try to make sure that you feel. No, it's about us. On the digital transformation, that's page 35. Youth and digital is on page 35 of the budget statement. Here I want to compliment the government for the investments made to move to online payments, such as for driver's license, CXC inspection, property tax, etc. And I want to still encourage the government to do more. I once again compliment the Inland Revenue Department workers and the leadership. On the page 4, pension reform, we would like to know how many new workers, retirees, have been paid using the 70% benefit formula. That is those joining the service after 1985.
The issue of the public library, restoration and modernization. In previous budgets, it was mentioned. However, I'm not seeing any mention in the 2021 budget. I don't know if I missed it, but it was just an observation. It has already been mentioned a number of times, but the aspect of how much of the capital expenditure we have been able to implement for a 10-year period, we have not been able to implement more than 230 million. I think that was in 2014. That's the best spend we have. We are supporting whatever can be done to be able to implement more, but that's where the issue of implementation comes in, and that is where staffing comes in. And that is where we have concern about the aspect of freezing of positions. And just as how the government has made use of the escape clause in terms of the fiscal stance relative to the pre-COVID period, that should also allow you to, just to repeat, to pay the public servants, the public officers, the 4%. As I said, a look at the budget will show that there are a lot of nice things that have been said. Nice words. I like resilience. Words that have been used, such as what the IMF used, the World Bank used. I understand that. But we contend that once we appreciate what economic resilience means, that there would have been probably between $100 million to $150 million a mark for agriculture rather than 40 million. And mind you, I'm not referring to 18 million because I'm taking the general provisions in the other departments for agriculture. So I'm not here speaking about 18 million. I'm addressing the 40 million. And we are saying, given the importance that we need to pay to resilience, recovery, transformation, and resilience, that agriculture needed to get between $100 and $150 million so they can do the necessary investments. And because economic resilience means that we must be able to weather the effects of severe economic shocks. Our land and our people are less likely to be affected by external shocks. So when we closed down the country, which we supported, the labor movement, it was a draconian, but I want to praise the firm decision of the decision makers, because I know that's not easy. It's not easy to tell your population, I'm shutting down. But I know we are better off today in understanding certain challenges. So the question of lockdown or so does not come into play as early as all the circumstances that may have given rise to that in March or April. Right? And I want to thank once again the colleagues who gave it their best shot in making those decisions. I know it will be tough. But once we see, here we are speaking about serious agriculture. We are not speaking about the traditional agriculture. You go with a cutlass and a fork. So, Deputy President, the youth wouldn't want to be involved in that. And why do we know that? Because most of us that came from agricultural background didn't stay in agriculture because our parents didn't want us to. They saw us as getting up and going in the mountain. That's how we say, we're going in the bush. Right? Going in the bush, you're going in the mountain. And they invested the time. And we are carrying the bananas on our head, and if you fall, make sure that you bust your behind, but the fig doesn't get damaged. And they did that so that we will move on. But we have recognized today the error in this. They meant well. So what we have to bring is technology. We have to bring technology and make it interesting so that apps can be created through you, Mr. Deputy President. Judd, I've always respected you for your interest in technology. Why can't we get apps and other things created that can plot? Seedlings can plot, right? When plants reach certain stages and what can be done. I have a colleague that is based in the US, a very good brethren of mine, that when he comes to Grenada, he can go on his phone and he's growing those things, using water in his basement. And we as a country, that's where we need to go. And that is where leadership comes in. I'm absolutely confident that given the youth that we have, if we go on the ground, if the leaders go on the ground and speak about agriculture or whatever it is we believe in, people will get involved. People will get involved. The amount of community services that took place during the revolution, what is different is the leadership. The leadership was that you could have felt the commitment of the leaders. And they led from the front. It was not about getting rich. I'm not saying anyone is doing this. It was not about getting rich. It was about service to country. And sometimes, in brief moments, because I do not like to stay in this nostalgia for too long, because we need to live in the present and go into the future, I say, boy, today with all the technology that we have, how life would have been today with the quality of leadership or the mindset of the revolutionary leaders. And I come down. And if you recognize, we can't run away from speaking about it, because even when this Prime Minister said the founding fathers in relation to MNIB, the revolution, when you speak about Maurice Bishop International Airport, the revolution, and although we are yet to get an apology from the company that may have done it for calling our airport the St. George Airport. It might appear to be small. I've never spoken about it before. But you know why? Because sometimes names are important and messages are important. Yes? And therefore leadership is important. The MNIB has a critical role to play in finding and providing guaranteed markets and prices to farmers. Because agriculture, if done in the right way, have a higher retention than most of the other areas, certainly tourism. Because and I am happy to hear the continued speaking about the linkages between agriculture and tourism. Yes, the linkages between agriculture and technology. These are important. We need to see more intersectorial linkages. And that is why today, in this budget debate, the TUC, and we are concerned about these linkages, because at the end of the day, what we are speaking about here is looking for the creation of employment, and not just short-term employment. We are looking for sustainable employment. Because in this discussion, and yes to construction, yes to all the other aspects, because none is independent of each other. And there's no country that will survive on agriculture alone. There's no country that will survive on tourism alone. Of deep concern to us is the fact that one of the hardest hit industry is that of the tourism industry. And we will all agree that the predominant workforce in the tourism industry were made up of women. And we will all agree that even if unemployment is 28.4%, or even if it is 35%, or even if it is 20%, as national unemployment, the rate is higher among women. And therefore, at 28.4% unemployment rate, that amongst women and youth will be higher. And as we speak about construction, we must bear in mind that construction is not traditionally dominated by or significantly have women in it. So that's part of the urgency that needs to be addressed. So apart from addressing unemployment in its general sense, we also need to drill down and say, okay, what are we doing for women? Especially where quite a large percentage of our household is led by single parents, by women. At the same time, we know that some of these are based on COVID, and COVID didn't bring this on. I want to make a plea. Let us condemn sexual violence. Let us condemn child abuse. Let us work towards, because all these are related to the psychological impact, the need for counseling. These are important. Another area of focus should be in the creative industries, because as the country locked down, and as you cannot go out, but through the electronic means, our artists can create and export. If my memory serves me right, I cannot remember the article number, but under the agreement that we have with the European Union, the EPA, European Partnership Agreement, I think that there are provisions there for art, for music, etc. And these are some of the areas that we can look into. I have often heard the argument which says that the investments, the FDIs, the foreign direct investments that we are getting into, that we have, these are the people who are willing to come. Okay. But I want us to have that entrepreneurial spirit, not for government to own, but to go out and source investors to come and invest in agriculture, come and invest in fisheries, come and invest in agro-processing, come and invest in helping us develop the means that we can partner with SGU to assist in creating medical services as a means of export services. So we have to set up policies and go out and actively pursue it. The question of we must see farm roads and feeder roads as contributing to the multiplier effect. We must see that. And I keep coming back to MNIB because I think it has that crucial role to play. I'll tell you something, Mr. Deputy President. My colleague here, Senator Sinclair, and I, and a number of us on the blocks in Ladue, when he was in the Marketing and National Imported Board, I remember those heated debate and discussions on the blocks. And we argued, so this is not a new argument, about the role of MNIB and how it has moved away from what MNIB can act as a price controlling agent. If you have the items, if you purchase from the farmers at a fixed price, right? Even if there are some elements of subsidies, as I say, there are other suggestions that I can give, but I don't think it is necessary for this forum here, right? To make sure that people buy and use local. Then, and once you market and advertise yourself properly, because consumers going to make decisions based on the information that they have. I mean, there are some people that will walk through the tongue of St. George and go in all the different stores before they buy one item. The majority of people may not do that. So if you're able to have those items and you can control the price, where you make something on it, obviously, but it is less than your competitors, once you market yourself, people will buy. And it will also force the others to bring down the price. And that is where aggressive leadership comes in. We also need to ensure, and I know it's a much talked about issue, to ensure that when we do our farm roads and feeder roads, it is not used to advance real estate. In a number of these areas, once you see a piece of road go down, the next thing you see the land cut up, and then houses go down. And our arable lands goes. If we look at what happened globally, because even during this period of the pandemic, we have seen a high demand for high-tech, high-level programming increase. As a matter of fact, in this period of COVID, more millionaires and multimillionaires have been created. I want to repeat. In this period of COVID, more millionaires and multimillionaires have been created. And if we are able, as a country, private sector, government, labor movement, other interest group, with the correct leadership, because that's why we elect governments for, to help steer the development of the country. If we are able to help identify the areas in some of this multi-billion-dollar industry, if you get a 0.2% of that, that's significant, extremely significant. And that is why I speak about the entrepreneurial spirit. Because in this period, as people become more and more reluctant to go out, and we have seen it now, because with the recent development in Sandals, you can feel the anxiety, and therefore the provision of culture that can reach people's home is an opportunity for the creative industry, even locally. So our Calypsonians, and yes, we need to pull our act together, but that's why we have a Ministry of Culture. A Ministry of Culture that can help start the conversation. You do not have to do it yourself. You do not have to, I'm not calling on government to do every single thing. No. Government cannot do every single thing. But I'm absolutely certain that government can set the tone. There's a reluctance by the private sector to do certain investments because the issue of confidence in the economy and how things will bounce back. Is present. And that is why it is important to maintain jobs, especially in the public sector. Because I'll tell you right now, in our view, and it is more than a view, had it not been for the public sector and keeping jobs, the economy would have been in a worse shape. I genuinely believe that the evidence is there. If you do a quick checking around, because I'm sure that the banks, the credit unions, etc., where a number of people have loans, had they lost jobs in the public sector, because the public sector have to hold on to jobs, and the government must be complimented for that. It's a duty. Is that right? Must be. We need to recognize that. Yes? Then more people, there would have been more challenges for people to pay and service their loans. Because when the larger countries sneeze, we catch the flu. Well, unfortunately, it has gone beyond the flu. It has gone to COVID-19, because all of our cases have been imported. What we can do as a nation is to examine and see where these countries have been able to make progress. What are the industries that they have been able to make progress in? And therefore, we can see what industries are doing well in times of this crisis and look to invest in those areas. I know that, as I said, there are 7 senators from St. Andrew. And to be quite frank, I'm proudly from St. Andrew because that's where I was born. I'm Grenadian. I'm a nationalist. I'm a regionalist. I see myself as an internationalist. And it is not just enough for us to feel proud or to stand here and boast that we are from St. Andrew. We would like to see all the parishes, including St. Andrew, develop. The Technical and Allied Workers Union, years ago, had one of its branches in St. Andrew. So much was the demand in relation to people working in St. Andrew and the surrounding areas. Years now, this branch is no longer in existence. Why? Because the rural economy has taken a serious hit. The rural economy has taken a serious hit. And therefore, it is on all of us to ensure that we make the call for development to be spread. We know that everything cannot be done at the same time. And that is why, if the investors that are coming in terms of tourism want to build on the beaches, and we can tell them where to build or where not to build, I'm absolutely certain about that. Just as so we made the hard decision to lock down the country, just as so we have made the decision to impose penalties, which I support, on people who violate the COVID or the protocol. We support that. And remember, we supported the increase of the penalties, while at the same time we call for the authorities to accept responsibility when the problems come about because of failure on their part to have the proper protocols in place. Likewise, we ought to be firm enough to know when we need to tell an investor that, look, even if this is what you want to do, but this is not your time now. It is important to do this. How much minutes I may have again?
10 more minutes, Senator.
Okay, good. Our workers are always prepared to make sacrifice. Our workers have always made sacrifice. The people of Grenada have made sacrifices. If we allow COVID to come and go, which may take a very long time, it may even stay with us forever, without addressing the fundamentals of job security. Now, I want to keep at it. And I know a number of people, because it's all related to the budget. It's all related to confidence. It's all, to you, Mr. Deputy President, the other side, as we have always done, have been praising the workers, and that's a fact. But you cannot take praises or thanks and go to a supermarket. I want to repeat. You cannot take praises or thanks and go to a supermarket. And many times, the issue is not just about money, you know. To you, Mr. Deputy President, as an employer, as a manager, you are aware of this. The aspect of motivation. Money is not the only motivator, or sometimes money is not even the motivating issue. I heard the Minister for Hospital Services, the minister that I praise, I wanted to continue, indicate that she have been, my words now, bombarded. She didn't say bombarded, my words. But she have been approached by countless workers in the hospital about the fact that they are not permanent. I don't know how you'll be able to motivate people more. We want them motivated. They are working hard. They come in every day. They want to be able to have as a trophy, as a certificate in their hand, an instrument of appointment, a letter from the relevant authorities which says that, dear Mr. Lewis, this is to confirm that you are permanent with the government of Grenada, effective 2003 from the date of your employment, or 2005, because we cannot undo that which is already done. So it will have to have retrospective implications. The minister said that she heard the complaints. Colleagues, we are not making this because we want to just talk. We know that there are concerns about productivity, but we argue that productivity is a managerial function. About 80% of productivity and performance lies at the doorstep of management. Colleagues, I worked in the private sector before I went full-time into the union. I left the private sector and went to the union. I didn't lose my job. And I worked in a company that was one of the better performing companies. And you know what's the unfortunate thing for me when I reflect on it? It was led by foreign people. But we could do this because this is our people. They invested in training, customer services training. They had a budget for training. They provided the tools, and you were supervised. And our locals, who got most of the work done, had the authority to be able to make certain decisions. And they were given that freedom. They knew their latitude. They were not micromanaged. I saw it happen. And we have a very good performance. But we need to invest in training. We need to use COVID. I'm making that request to all of us as individuals, workers, employers, and the government as the single and largest employer. This is a time for retooling, for retraining. Let us ask our managers in the public sector, and I'm zeroing on the public sector, to come up with work plans, identify training needs. The Trade Union Council and the Trade Union Movement has done more training now than we have done in a long time. The virtual platform has given us so many opportunities, whereas in the past, the institutions that were involved in training will invite 2 people, and because of the cost of traveling, etc., had to be limited to 2. Now they're giving you 5, 10. The Caribbean Congress of Labor, through the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, there are close to 60 trade unionists being trained right now, been exposed to training with the College in Trinidad, virtually. And as we speak, there are other local trade unionists who are involved in different training. I'm absolutely certain it can be done in the public sector. I'm absolutely certain that it can be done in the private sector. And we need to do it. We need to sit in the different entities, just as the labor movement, because we have to make those changes too. That's where succession planning comes in. Succession planning is not only about planning for leadership, but it is about identifying trends. It's about identifying where you want to go, identifying the tools that are required. Speaking of industrial relations is not just about marching the street, and we are good at it. But we are also very much interested in training, because we want to have a workforce that can hold its own. We want to have a country that can find itself and maintain itself in this space. So I'm using this forum to you, Mr. Deputy President, and I'm sure you will understand that, given the private sector and the company that you work in, and given your background, will understand the need for plans, the need for management, and the need for investing in our people. To our colleagues, again, in Sandals, okay, something that really, really reached me and reach a lot of us, and I'm sure the government too, because we are human beings. I'm absolutely sure, despite the faces that you're seeing, that appear on television and seem to be shying away and passing the blame, I'm confident that it reached all of us. What is important many times, I'm going to end the way I start, on them, because it's important. When I start giving thought to the budget, obviously they were not in my mind. But being aware that there are other workplaces that are impacted. We represent workplaces that are impacted right now. We represent workplaces that have workers at home. This is not a call against the government. This is not a call against the government, but this is a call that if we do not do what is necessary as leaders, I am not the one that making decisions whether or not I could tweak the protocol. I am not the one that are making decisions as a matter of fact. The Caribbean Congress of Labour wrote CARICOM in May, June. Remember when they were talking about opening up in June? And we said that we are not yet ready to open. As a matter of fact, the Grenada government must be given credit. The Prime Minister said quite clearly that we are not yet ready to open, and he must be given credit for that. And I know we cannot remain locked down forever. But in keeping with these, we had said that whatever you do, ensure that you identify the challenges. So, for instance, one of the considerations I know that were discussed in the region, and what the problem is that the region is not all in this together, as we fight to see who could get more of the tourists and get more, and because our borders are porous, I know that these are some of the challenges that we have. So Barbados might be doing something different, Antigua doing something different, St. Vincent, St. Lucia. And that is why we have to be extremely careful. One of the thought process was that if you go into a Sandals arrangement that is all-inclusive, so that people know that you come in there, everything is there, you don't have to go out, then you ought to make provision for the workers who will know that when you reach there, you're at least here for 2 weeks. Or you provide meals, accommodation, everything. And there's a procedure before you go out in terms of the testing, quarantine. Are you following me? So the balance could be sought and met between health and well-being and economics. But somehow, probably, the ball was dropped. So we want to reaching out to them. We want to call on our Grenadian population. Do not make fun of anyone who may be impacted. Do not discriminate. I had that experience within our union at a particular workplace where a worker will return to work because our union dealt with that. That's the end. Our union dealt with that in the end, and that's okay. And we are able.
Senator, I'll give you a couple of minutes to wrap up.
Thank you very much. Because that's important. We were able, and you know what was good? And that's what we crave of government as an employer. In that particular place, in the private sector, the management accepted, boy, we could have done this different. So that when the worker went back to work, the workers were not called and prepared that look, because everyone knew that the person came from an area that were infected. So we were able to work that out. We were able to bring in the medical practitioners, yes, Dr. Francis, and meet with the workers, meet with management and say, look, the necessary protocols have been followed, right? You are not at risk. So people felt confident. People felt confident. So whatever we do as government, and I'm saying government because at the end of the day, you leads this. I'm asking of you to show the leadership, show the mettle by accepting when you may have done something wrong. Yes? And not appearing. Because that's how we feel. Even if that's not what you meant. Almost everyone that I've spoken to, and I've been around the island. I've been in Laddick, I've been in Willis, I have been in Grenville, and I speak to people who represent workers. The interpretation of some of the press conferences, and I want to be brutally frank and blunt here because we need to do it. I've seen a tone down on the message, but by the Minister of Health, and some of the pronouncements are not going across good. And people feel as though we are blamed. If that's not your intention, have a relook at your messaging. And we give the commitment to work along with the government and all the stakeholders and to call upon the population to let us continue what we have been doing to follow the protocols. And at the same time, to call upon the state that wherever there needs to be amendments to the protocols, do it, and please let us know. And therefore, that's the end of my contribution. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. I want to ask for the indulgence of senators to take a 5-minute break because this chair has no opportunity to get a break because this chair has no body to substitute. So we'll take a 5-minute break now and we'll come back and start at 25 minutes past based on the clock.
25 to 25.
Yeah, so we'll come back at 3:30.
3:22 now.
So yeah, let's come back at 3:30. We'll come back at 3:30. Yeah. Yes, 8 minutes. Yeah. Senate now stands adjourned until 3:30. Right.
Yo, Shaggy, one up every time. Grenada, GBN, salute.
The Christmas Caravan is brought to you in part by Hubbard's and the Food Fair Supermarkets, Kittens Healthcare, Sissons Paint, and Bryden and Miners and Ace Hardware. The Christmas Caravan is brought to you in part by Hubbard's and the Food Fair Supermarkets, Kittens Healthcare, Sissons Paint, and Bryden and Miners and Ace Hardware.
So we need to get the facts straight. How does this virus work? How does it transmit? Where does it want to go? And let's protect ourselves. I'm Dr. Peter Lynn. I'm a family physician in Toronto, Canada. The coronavirus is a family of viruses that can cause as mild things as just a common cold, all the way up to SARS or MERS. These are these bad pneumonias that we're talking about. And basically what these viruses are, they look like a tennis ball with all these spikes sticking out of it. And depending on the type of spike, it allows that virus to attach to certain places. So some viruses, they have the spike that attaches to your nose. So basically you just get a common cold. But the SARS virus and this new virus that we're talking about has the spike that allows it to attach to the cells in your lung. And when it attaches there, it puts in information to make photocopies of itself. So it uses our equipment to make more viruses.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus.
Most of the coronaviruses live in animals. In this particular case, it was from Wuhan. There was a fish market where they were selling live animals. And the thought is that the virus was in a live animal, then it crossed into a human. But then what we found was that people were getting sick in terms of healthcare workers, in terms of family members that were looking after them, which now meant that the virus can pass from human to another human. Just like all viruses, it needs to reach a target, which is your lung, and it has to get there with your help. It has no feet and no wings, so therefore it needs us to move it there. So that's why we keep saying, don't hang around sneezy people because you're going to breathe it in, and don't touch your face because that's how the virus is going to get in. The masks are helpful, but they're not necessary because they're leaky. The ones that you and I buy basically have pockets here, so therefore the virus can get in. What the masks really do is they stop us from touching our face. If you're sick, we tend to mask you, so therefore you're not spewing out the viruses to other people sitting around you. The true people that have the real masks are the N95. Those are sealed. These are for the doctors that may be caring for the patients. So in the beginning, the coronavirus will cause kind of like flu-like symptoms or a cold. So people just get the stuffy nose, that kind of thing. But you'll understand that as soon as that virus starts manufacturing in your lung cells, they're producing all these copies of the virus, all of a sudden now you kill the lung cells. So now you can't exchange oxygen, and that's why one of the early symptoms is people get very short of breath, and they tend to have a difficult time breathing, and that's why they end up in hospital. So currently, unfortunately, we don't have a direct treatment for the coronavirus. So we don't have a medication that can kill it off. And so it's really supportive. So in other words, the patient can't breathe, we give them oxygen, help them to breathe. They can't drink, so therefore we give them fluids to support them. Their kidneys begin to shut down, we help them with all those things. So it's a very supportive process. This is a new virus that we've never seen before. So our immune system, our army, are having a hard time figuring out what to do. So usually what we have to do is we make something called antibodies. So these are things that can grab onto the spikes that we see on the virus, and it'll get rid of the virus for you, and that will actually bring you back to good health. So therefore the elderly may have a worse outcome, and of course the young children. So the babies, their immune system is not so good either, so they may not make those antibodies as well. So just remember, your hands may be with virus. Virus cannot hurt you because it can't get through the skin. But the moment I do this, now I've brought the virus right to where it wants to go. So let's remember not to touch our hands to our face. So let's say you think that you might have been on a plane or you might have bumped into somebody that has it. What should you do? So the first thing is to contact a healthcare worker to tell them that potentially you have it. If you're feeling symptoms and you're going to go into a facility, call ahead. Okay, so whether you're calling the paramedics or whether you're calling the hospital or your doctor, just mention that you were on a flight. If you don't have any symptoms, then what we do is a little bit of a self-quarantine. In other words, we can just keep you away from other people, and so you don't go into parties, don't go with your friends, don't go into public transportation. So we can contain it very easily by making sure that you do a self-confinement, so to speak, for the, let's say, 7 to 14 days is the longest incubation time. So after that, if you're feeling well, then you don't have anything to worry about. If we get the facts right, then we don't have to be overly worried, but we do the right things so that we don't get the virus ourselves and that we don't pass it on to others. And if we look after each other in this way, this virus will have nowhere to go. It needs us to move it, it needs us to make copies for it, and if we don't help it, then the virus will stop. So we have the power to do that right now.
In that ministry for the preparation of a document, I believe, Mr. Deputy President, one that is unparalleled to what we've seen before, and a document that is definitely suited and will be an answer and a positive guide for our present economic situation. Mr. Deputy President, I'd also like to say thank you and congratulations to our own leader of government business in this chamber, Senator the Honorable Simon Still, for his presentation and what he has done and the contribution made towards this document thus far. Mr. Deputy President, it is evident from the measures, the policies, and the programs that will be rolled out or implemented from this budget, there's no doubt in my mind, as I've said, that the new National Party government is definitely people-centered. It is the type of governance that engages its people, or the citizens of the state. Listen to them, Mr. Deputy President. Discuss with them. Accept questions. Discuss with the relevant officials or officers within the public service, and put an implementation framework in place. One, that they would evaluate and check its effectiveness and responses, Mr. Deputy President, to the demands of the people. Mr. Deputy President, lest we forget, I'd like to remind us all, not just those of us who are in this chamber, but everyone in our island, that we are operating, or better said, we are living in unprecedented times, Mr. Deputy President. COVID-19 is continuing to create uncertainty, real panic, the world over. COVID-19 is real, it is present, and it is persistent. It is a danger, Mr. Deputy President, not only to our lives, but also to our livelihoods, and of course, is affecting the way we do many things, the way we do business, the way we once learn, the way we meet and greet, the way in which we conduct life in a general way. Mr. Deputy President, over 70 million people worldwide have already contracted this virus, and approximately 1.6 million, unfortunately, based on the records, have died as a result. Let me join the others before me, and more recently, our Senator Responsibility for Labor on the other side, in thanking and commending, congratulating all of our frontline workers in whatever division or department they work, whether it's medical, the police officers, as we've said before, immigration and customs, those who protect our borders, those who work with them at the borderlines, those who so freely on a daily basis put themselves and their family at risk by continuing to do their jobs, irrespective of the fact that they know the risk that it entails. I want to join with those before me and say thank you. I know that it's been said that thank you can't go to the supermarket, but it might help lift the morals. And we genuinely mean it when we say thank you, because thus far, irrespective of our recent spike and cluster, they have done a tremendously good job, Mr. Deputy President, and they have kept us safe. What we boast about today of Grenada being among the best, second in this, in the OECS and the sub-region, and about 44th or 44th in the world in terms of the way we handled. It was not only because of the foresight of government, it was not only because there was a good COVID committee in place, but it was twinned with the commitment of all of those people who decided come hell or high water, we'll take the risk and we'll go forward and do what is expected of us. So we need to commend them and thank them, Mr. Deputy President. I would also like to join to sympathize with management and staff of the Sandals Resort. It's a troubling time for all of us. Whatever it is they're going through is something that we all need to be concerned about, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy President, and sorry, I'm so used to Speaker. I've spent more time in the lower house, Mr. Deputy President, than I have in this house. Okay, great. It may well be. So you better start practicing and accept it now. Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. Analysts focus that the world's economy would contract by at least 4.4% by the end of 2020. And that growth, economic growth for 2021, may average just about 2.8%. In our own country, right here in Grenada, Mr. Deputy President, we will be short in revenue collection based on the reports that come to us by $132 million. And we'll record a 12% decline in economic growth by the end of 2020. Mr. Deputy President, despite the unprecedented challenges we are faced with as a government and as a people, I know that this administration is determined to deliver and to assist the people of this beloved country to overcome the problems and challenges that we are faced with at this time. Mr. Deputy President, I believe that the budget, the motion that we are debating, yes, our budget that was presented to this House, will definitely stimulate some aspects of the economy and will create much needed jobs for many of our citizens. One may ask, Mr. Deputy President, where would these jobs come from? We have heard a lot before. We have heard some people believe, some don't. And Mr. Deputy President, with your concurrence, I crave the indulgence that those of us who want to follow that, we look at page 12 of the budget speech, right there at the bottom, Outlook for 2021. And it says here, Mr. Speaker, we are projecting a return to positive economic growth in 2021. It's a lot of talk about agriculture, but here is what? The agriculture, which is number one here, that was listed. Construction, wholesale and retail sectors will drive the recovery. Other key sectors, including tourism, private and tertiary education, are projected to recover much slower and will affect the speed of the recovery. Mr. Deputy Speaker, a lot has been said about agriculture. And many of us in this honorable house here in this chamber, in one way or the other, is associated with agriculture. Whether we are practicing farmers, like myself, trying to do something, trying at least to ensure that there is food security, not just for my family, but at least within my community. I don't want to say all that I do. I see the clerk is laughing. He's a friend of mine, and he understands and knows some of the things that I do, but that is for another place and another time, Mr. Senator, for fisheries and agriculture. When we're doing we normal little cook-up, we talk about those things, not for the honorable house. But I want to, Mr. Deputy Speaker, just zeroing on a few of the things that was said about agriculture. Number one among them, not enough is being budgeted for the sector. And it is not the first time or the first budget debate we have heard that statement. And I wrestle with the thought at times, and I ask myself, is it really not enough being budgeted? Or is it a situation where, as a people, as a country, as a sector, we do not maximize the total potential of what is in that sector and what is budgeted for us? And I want to cite a few examples, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Maybe I'd have to go back into history a little bit. And forgive me for not having a document to refer to, but I'm speaking from memory now. We oftentimes talk about we need to see more for agriculture. And I do agree. I honestly do agree, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that maybe with more money, as some people would like to see, a bit more can be done. But with the present amount being budgeted, if you are to do a search, go 5 years back and look at what has been budgeted for the Ministry of Agriculture and tell me 1 year in which all of the money budgeted for capital project has been spent and there was a desire or a request for more. I rather doubt that we can find a budget that will prove that to us. So I know the challenge there will be, as we said, implementation. The rate is low, and I do agree. But what causes that? Is it simply because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we do not have sufficient people in place? And I rather doubt that also. And I'll give you an example of why I say that. And there are a few more things that I would say about the issue. As we speak, the Ministry of Agriculture is attempting to do a backyard gardening project. The former minister, before the cabinet chief, did announce it, started the process. They intend to engage some 500 families. Again, we talk about the need to ensure that there is food security. And through that program, there is hope that people will be able to grow more and be able to feed themselves and depend more on what is grown in the backyard. Grant money is being provided. There's a need to purchase, at this present time, 500 water tanks, which will be given to these 500 families so that they can ensure there's always a supply of water for whatever little they will be doing as backyard gardening. The monies are available. The board, the team that is looking at that, has already agreed. There have been people sorting prices, where and who can provide us with this equipment for the best possible price. And because of one particular individual within the ministry having to sign off, that process have not yet been completed, simply because the gentleman in question doesn't feel that there's a need for 500 tanks. Is it implementation that is the problem, Mr. Deputy President? Or is it because some of us just want to prove that we have power? Or maybe some of us feel if certain projects are being fulfilled, a particular minister, a government, or a department may get some praise, that may constitute into votes. I am not sure. But I am prepared to debate and to argue that the real issue with agriculture is not the lack or total lack of funding or insufficient funding, Mr. Deputy Speaker. President, sorry. Mr. Deputy President, my good friend, I ain't hitting under the belt, yeah? My Senator for Agriculture. We love each other. I know he could take it. He could take it a little above the belt, so I didn't think he's going to take so much under the belt. But I must thank you. Your debate was very spirited, and as was mentioned, I think was by the president before, you're very energetic. I mean, I've known you for quite a long time, a St. Andrews man, but now he also lives in the neck of my wood. You know, he lives in the Northeast. And I would not say the rest and the purpose why you are there. No, I'm not like that. Family secret must stay family secret. But you did commend the farmers for producing. Well done. They continue to, even in challenging times, and some more than others have greater difficulties. But they are persistent. They are continuous. And you wanted to see transformation. But you know, you are best placed now as Senator to do a lot of work. And I don't envy you. If you really want to see the transformation of that sector, you have to put your shoulders to the wheel. They're pretty large, and you have to push. Because I tell you something. When you mention about the lack of funding and the financial institutions are very reluctant to do business with our farmers, it is a fact. But you know what is also a fact? Not very long ago, a study was done as it relates to the compliance rate of farmers paying back, remembering where they borrow from. And our foreparents, most of us who grew up with grandparents, always heard the word, when you borrow, you must pay. That is not something much of the farmers in Grenada have learned. 80% non-compliance rate among the farming community. And we need to find out why. Is it because they are not making money? Or is it because we are not business-minded enough to do better? I recalled, and we will go back a little bit, sometime after Hurricane Ivan. You gotta keep your eyes on the clock and give me a little thing every now and again. I just get carried away. There were 2 programs that was implemented by the government. But I'd rather talk about the second one, which was called, I think, the Agricultural Rehabilitation Program. That is when the government, and then you may well know about that, decided that with 90% of the agricultural sector down, Mr. Deputy President, government came in and decided that they must provide some assistance in the way of funding. And I would never forget the discourse at the cabinet level when they were constituting that body that will determine who gets loans and how it will be disbursed. And the Prime Minister at the time, who is still the Prime Minister today, said clearly that he did not want any minister of government to be part of that team. So who was selected? One person from the Ministry of Agriculture, I think it was then. One person from the Ministry of Finance, and 3 farmers, outstanding farmers, which they asked the farming community to name. They weren't selected by cabinet members. It came from the committee, the farming community. But the way in which it was, the program had to be instituted, $40,000 was the maximum amount that any one farmer could get. But the intent was not for any one farmer to get $40,000 in one tranche. The program was set up. The extension division had to be heavily involved. An example will be if I was the farmer and I decided everything that I had in my land was down, what I wanted to grow, what I wanted to get involved in, we'll do a proposal. The extension officer for the area will come. They will determine what quantum of that do I need to really do what I do. Would it be 40,000? Would it be 30,000? Would it be 20,000? 40 was the maximum. Doesn't mean every farmer has to get 40. And then determine what portion of that do I need for land preparation, clearing and plowing and other things. What do I need for seed and fertilizer and chemicals and to keep the crop going? And then what do I need for maintenance? So at least 3 tranches. The result, very unfortunate for us. This was meant to be a revolving fund. Over $12 million invested in that. Into farming, into agriculture, for our farmers. Unfortunately, there were many farmers who got $40,000 up front in one tranche. What happened? 2% probably, if that much, turned back and look at the ministry and made a payment. I got a story from a gentleman who is a farmer, and he's somewhere from Senator Lewis's area. And he said to me, and that was very recent, you know, because he's expected now to get some assistance again from the SAEP project. He said, you know, I got some money from that. And I went in one day and inquired, where do I have to go and pay? He went into the ministry. And whoever he spoke to then asked him, were you called by anyone? And the farmer said, no, I wasn't. Did they tell you that you have to come and pay? He said, no, but I took a loan and I signed that I would pay so much. The officer then said to him, well, we ain't know nothing about that here. There ain't no money to repay. And the farmer said so to me. I mean, I'm saying second-hand story, no, but that is what the farmer said. So I'm just trying to build and show a picture here. What really is our issue as it relates to agriculture? Is it insufficient funding, as we're hearing? More budgetary allocation? Or the need for us all, government, private sector, farmers, and everyone else that is involved, marketers, to come together and say, let's put all the differences, all other things in a bag and put it aside. Because what is important here is for us to push this sector forward for our own survival and ensure that some people's basket would alwa't have bread in it so they can feed themselves and their family. And I can give numerous stories, Mr. Deputy President, but I will take it one at a time. Mr. Deputy President, just to conclude on agriculture, and our dear Senator, a lot of suggestions, many suggestions. But I oftentimes wonder, why does it have to be government to always take the lead? So, for example, the suggestion that with agro-processing, that maybe government can set up a properly well-equipped agro-processing plant, and the small one, those in the cottage industry can go in. Why does it have to be government? You've been in marketing for quite a long time, and I'm sorry, Mr. Deputy President, through you, our dear Senator has been in marketing for quite a long time. And he is in a very fortunate position now as the manager, and I don't want people to know your business too much, but I have to say it, of the Nutmeg Association, who has an excellent building, and of course is one of those down to benefit from the Agricom project, which is putting out millions of dollars, grant money. Where is the thinking? Why can't they come forward? But we also have, Mr. Deputy President, the Cocoa Association. We hear it talk about value added all the time, who have been in the production of chocolate for quite some years now. But I wonder, Mr. Deputy President, all this value added and money, what increase has the farmers received since then on the price of cocoa? Mr. Senator for Agriculture, maybe you have to do some investigations. You know. As a matter of fact, rather than the cocoa farmers getting an increase, the Cocoa Association was prepared to drop the price of cocoa on the farmers, and it was the same government who we are saying are not budgeting sufficiently for agriculture that stepped in and said, okay, you can't do that, and so we'll give you some money for price support. Value added, more money coming in. When last did we get a report? Do we know? In fact, presently, Mr. Deputy President, something that I want you to take note. Yesterday I was writing, yesterday I was a journalist. I want you to be one today. Write that down. The workers at the factory in Diamond refused to work yesterday. And you know why? It is normal that around the Christmas season, they will get a little bonus for 3 weeks. It was not given to them. However, the upper management received the 2 months bonus. Find out why, sir. Find out why. And we wonder why we have problems. I will always talk for the farmers, but that one does lead to confrontation. Let's not go down that road. But I'm happy for you, your support there. Please assist the Honorable Senator in making sure that the farming community and those who are involved in it can benefit. It is a fact that these workers are not treated. Let me tell you one more thing and let me move on. Time is running on. The workers are being provided at that factory with uniform. The management gave them only 1 T-shirt and let them know they had to wash it and let it get dry if they want to come with it the following day. Mr. Deputy President, please do. I do agree that we need to work assiduously on our land bank issue, our land policy. These are things that we have spoken about many a times. And I'm happy when I heard dear Senator Lewis said, you know, when we make suggestions in this Honorable House, it's not always because we are anti or we are against. I do believe that. I believe sometimes the comments are very genuine and we need to take stock. This government is not perfect, not at all. But when we say that things are not happening and we talk about, agro-processing and more needs to be done, nothing in the budget for manufacturing, this is not really and truly a governmental issue. We do have, for those of us who do not know, this Honorable House is where a bill was passed. In fact, I think it was in 2015, sometime in November, called the Incentive Act that is being administered by the GIDC, where it is clearly detailed all of the incentives that you can get for doing different things. And sometimes we complain so much about foreign investors, but what are we doing? We say that the banks are very liquid. They have so much money. Why aren't we together putting, why haven't, and interestingly, Honorable Senator, you did say yesterday that maybe cocoa and nutmeg can't do much more because they are cash strapped. I agree with you for that. I agree with you for that admission. That admission, so good. But if they are, and the government has put together and put forward a proposal that says, listen, 80% of your farmers that grow cocoa also grow nutmeg. They grow side by side in the same field. That when you fertilize cocoa, you fertilize nutmeg. You clean cocoa land, you clean nutmeg. Why can't you come together, amalgamate, cut costs, cut overheads, and make sure that there's greater benefit for the farmers? Why are we resisting that and making it sound as though it is a political move for government to take over? We want to see more, and I believe we genuinely want to see that the agricultural sector do better. Let us use our position and our voices to educate the farmers of this country better and make them know that this is going to be a way of assisting them to get more benefit. One of the ways. The reforecasting of marketing board, much was said on that. I do believe, and I remember, Mr. Deputy President, It was during the 2008 period when I had the good fortune of, and I call it a good fortune, serving in the lower house on the opposition side then. I did make mention that should the new National Party return to government, we need to take a look then, and the Hansard will prove that, at the Marketing, National and Importing Board, and really find out what the founding fathers, as we have said, and I've used those exact words, meant and what they wanted, what was the core purpose of setting up the Marketing Board and return to it. In those days, Mr. Deputy President, I sold some of my produce to the Marketing Board, and I recall going there one day, and some of the workers, they almost gang up on me and say, yeah, so when an NP win, you want to come and fire us, yeah? You want to make us redundant? I said, I never said so. What do you mean by refocusing? And I had to explain to them. So it was something in the making, and we do understand, and the dear Senator and myself worked pretty close together during the era after that when I was placed as Minister of Agriculture, while Marketing Board did not fall directly under our watch, but there were certain collaborative efforts that we had, that we worked closely with the Marketing and National Importing Board, and we attempted to do many things. And I must say thank you and congratulations for the way you all helped. We had pushed the whole issue of source of production. We had got the Marketing Board then to identify for us fields, because they were one of the exporters, fields that had nice trees, good size, prolific bearers, and they paid for the fruits. And asked the farmers not to touch it. They picked it. We got the seeds when we were able to produce at the Maribor and, of course, Ashenden and some of the other nurseries, 17,000 and 18,000 plants per year. So, yes, they have been doing good. They have done some good work, but as said by someone in the other place, as it's been commonly called, they may have lost their way. Mr. Deputy President, much to do about the fact that we are not investing in sustainable areas. An admittance was given by our dear Senator for Labour that government must be thanked and praised for not shedding jobs that the public sector has maintained. Well, thank you for that admission. And we do not disagree far. We accept the fact that there is a signed agreement for wage increase. And no one in government, I don't believe, have said that it should not be paid. What the government has presently asked for is a deferral to a later date. The government is appealing to the good conscience of the workers and the unions, and one admit that sacrifices are being made, sacrifices have been made over the years, but more will have to be made by all of us, not just the workers. And I'd ask for a copy of that statement that you read. Maybe it was from the teachers' union. Because there's an aspect of it that I don't necessarily agree with. Can't sow the seeds of, I can't quote you directly. You could help me, Mr. Deputy President. Is it okay for him to help me? Go ahead. You have been given the okay. Because you still didn't give me the copy, so I can't read it. So you can't sow the seeds of, I can't remember. I don't have what you said. You was going too fast for me. And I don't want to misquote you. That's why I asked for a copy. I want to make sure, because you are much more technical than my friend on your left. I don't think nothing. Yes, it was something about the law of reaping and sowing. But whatever it is you said there, you know, the issue of dark salaries is something that has been discussed widely in the public domain, between the unions and the government, and there have not been a conclusion. The matter, as far as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, has been taken to the courts, where there is hope that sooner than later there'd be some kind of conclusion, there'd be some judgment on it, which I hope, whichever way it goes, that there will be agreement on what the courts have decided. Yes? As we've said before, and I think every single member in this honorable house has agreed that we are living in unprecedented time. COVID-19 is something that we never prepared for, that we didn't know was coming. We accept that there can be disasters from time to time, but the magnitude of this one and how it is affecting, and the fact that it is changing all the time, you get new information and you have to keep changing and doing different things, is not something I think any country world over has been prepared for. As a matter of fact, for those of us who look at the news would know that countries with economies far more robust than Grenada's economy, far better off, in a far stronger economic position, today are on their knees, some of them probably flat on the posterior as a result of COVID. So it is as a result of this situation, because when the agreement was signed, the projection was not that we would have COVID. The projection was not that in 2020 there would be a deficit of 12% in the economic situation in Grenada. In fact, there was a projection that there would continue to be growth, because it is true that over the last 5 to 7 years, there have been consistent growth in the economy, and that there have been surpluses. So I don't believe, and I don't see why we have to match the two together. I think there are two separate situations. Yes, they both deal with workers, maybe the same workers, but not along the same lines. They are not parallel with each other. We are waiting on a day in court, on a decision for the court to deal with the first issue. And as a trade unionist, I accept the fact that you need to keep it alive. Give hope. You have to. Give hope to your workers. But to use it to say, as a result of this, we are not going to accept and accede to that. You are in fact and indeed saying, and undoing all the many good things you say, that you are happy and you want the government to continue to be able to provide jobs and so, and knowing fully well that if government is to go now on the recurrent side to add $13.2 million to the wage bill, that it definitely would have to be, one way or the other, either layoffs or a significant cut in the capital budget and the jobs that we're hoping, while many of them may be temporary, to inject that life back into the economy and bring the confidence, as you have said, Honorable Senator, that local people are not investing because they are not very confident that we can rebound and get out of this situation soon enough. The investment by the public sector would allow them to get that confidence. So I say, and I advise, that let us look at the issue of a deferral of the 4% as an independent and separate issue. I'm not a trade unionist. You may not agree with me, but I think for the benefit of all the workers and the jobs that we want to save, we need to do that. One of the very first things that you said, Honorable Senator, Mr. Deputy Speaker, through you, that I want to use a word that I've heard before, that I take great umbrage with. And I think after recognizing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the implication of what you said, he went over and said, well, that's the implication that we get, and maybe that's not what was meant, that the government is leveling blame on the population for the present situation that exists with Sanders. I did not get that impression. And I do not believe for one moment that government would want to blame the public. Someone said to me that they thought the Minister for Health looked a little angry. Again, their impression when he was being interviewed. But I recall the minister clearly saying that that issue and what has happened will be investigated thoroughly and that if there were breaches, if breaches were found in the protocol, that whoever has to get it, whatever blame, whatever else, whatever decision will be taken, will be taken. So with that statement only, I don't know and see how the government or anyone in government can turn around and blame the Grenadian population. I don't know if we are getting mixed up. The fact that there is a constant call by those in authority for our populace to continue to obey the protocols and to continue to practice what is being asked of them, because even before we had that unfortunate situation with Sandals, we have been told time and time again, we do not know where, we do not know when, but we cannot let our guards down. We know we are dealing with a very fluid situation. And there are those who are of the opinion that, government must be blamed because if they did not open up the borders. And leadership is not an easy thing. Because sometimes you have to make decisions that may not necessarily be popular, but may be correct. And having said that, it reminds me, Mr. Deputy President, that when I entered politics, I entered with a motto. And those who have been around me for long enough will know it, especially the people in the constituency that I represented for 3 consecutive terms. I do not aim to do what is popular, but what is correct. That has always been my motto. And I believe for most of us in public life, we'd have to accept that. There are times we may do things that will not be popular, but correct. And of course, when the government, of course, with the COVID team being present and advising, decided that it was time, and yes, let's open up the borders. And they did it in a phased basis, starting to open up retail and wholesale places gradually before international flights was allowed back in. They did always recognize and announce that there was a level of risk with that. But they do not have the responsibility as a government only to protect lives, but also livelihoods, which both government and the trade union movement will agree with each other that the protection of jobs and livelihood of people is something that is of great importance. So I do not agree, I do not share, and I want to debunk that the government is blaming the population. We can't. We won't. Well, not we so much, but they can't and they won't. I have to understand that, yes, I am in the Senate, but I am not, Mr. Deputy President, a member of the government. I want to move on, Mr. Deputy President. And in moving on, I want to take a look at another area, infrastructure development, and just the capital side of it, not necessarily the recurrent, because of course the minister with responsibility for infrastructure had ably dealt with that. But our good Senator Noel, did this morning in his presentation make some pronouncements, which I'd like to just offer a few things to. And of course, from Senator Lewis' presentation earlier on, one of the early things he said is that he continued to plead for the officers, police officers in that case, at the Grenville police station. The need for more work, or some work to be done on that station where they are being housed. And I sought to get you a little bit of answer, or some answers, and one of the things that I was told is that at the moment there's active discussion over the years, a lot of work has been done on that police station, and there is a strong possibility that one or two things may happen. Either a completely new building would have to be put there, demolish what is there, because there appears to be, from preliminary studies, some structural defects, or there may have to be a total relocation. But either or, it needs time, planning, and budgetary allocation. However, though, I was told that some remedial work will be done, however small it is, during 2021 to ensure that at least the accommodation for those officers will be much better than it is presently, and that your concern will be addressed. So, you know, we work together, right, all the time. Yes, and you know, we don't agree on everything, but we work together sometimes. There's also the fact that you mentioned, and I want to clear up and finish up on that, that more aggressive monitoring for areas where people have been quarantined or what have you.
Senator, this is a time check. You have just under half an hour left.
Just about?
Half an hour.
Half an hour again? That I do agree, and I think that the government will agree, that after review, because remember, nothing is really perfect, yes? That we have to review and ensure that we do better. The issue of changes of permanent secretaries, so many of them having been changed in the Ministry of Finance, I think most of us know part of the reason why. One of the better permanent secretaries that we all had and loved very much, and I think probably the entire nation may agree, I don't think everything we see everyone would agree, was Mr. Antoine, Timothy Antoine, you know? You know, he has been probably one of the better ones we have seen for a very long time. In the region, I agree with you. And we know definitely why we had to relinquish him. Why, we would have rather keep him here, but one cannot prevent a seed from growing, you know, when the time comes. When he left, his deputy took over, Mr. Mike Sylvester, who sometime soon after that had an opportunity to be seconded to the World Bank, where he got much needed experience and exposure. Again, one did not expect a government to say no to something like that, knowing that he will come back at some later date to continue to serve. Then we had Miss Ophelia Wells, who after his departure took over. She too went to study, and of course, as we speak now, Mr. Mike is back. He's back, yes? I can't hear you, you know. You have to talk loud enough for me to hear what you're saying. So those things has happened, and of course that's why we have seen some turnaround. But it is not because I think people, and sometimes when you lose, we have to accept the fact, when you lose a very good person who have set a certain standard in a position, sometimes it's difficult to immediately get someone else to replace that person and to operate at the very same standard like them. They need time to grow and to emerge. And of course, I think in Mr. Sylvester, we will soon find that having worked along with Mr. Antoine and then getting that exposure at the World Bank for 2 years or whatever period, he will soon, I believe, prove to us that he has the kind of acumen that is needed for the job. The fact that the private sector don't invest, well, if they are not, that's why foreign people come. Because we don't want to take the opportunities. We have the same opportunities. And I just want to say quickly, let's take KENCO, Renegade Spirits, as an example. They are here, Mr. Deputy President. The local company is called KENCO. The parent company is Renegade Spirits, who operate in other parts. I think they have some work doing in Ireland and some other places. They have arrived here and decided to plant cane, sugar cane, something that we all knew and we moved away from some years ago. I recall, as Minister of Agriculture, when these people first came, I wondered if they were for real. I honestly did wonder if they were for real. I say, sugar cane? And the first engagement that we had, what they really wanted was to have local cane farmers produce cane and sell to them. That was the first arrangement. They did not come here with the intention to get into cane production themselves. They were prepared to build a factory and, of course, to do some work in the manufacturing of the product, to age the rum, and to send it out of Grenada. They indicated then, and I don't know if that policy has changed since, that they had no intention of selling their rum on the local market. But the inability, again, to get, and I remember we're bringing in the Cane Farmers Association, that we have had several discussions with them, and they could not agree on how they will, as an association, grow sufficient cane, because the people said, look, for what we're getting into, we need at least 500 acres of cane. That will give us a year-round supply. The inability to get that, an opportunity for our own local farmers to be the growers and then sell it to them, did not materialize, so they had to get into the production of cane. Hence, the forming of the company locally called CaneCo. To date, they are already producing rum. They have just about 200 acres of cane under cultivation, leasing lands from local owners. They have not purchased except for a portion of land where the factory is being built. Every other piece of land that they are planting cane on is being leased, and at, I believe, very reasonable and lucrative price. Mr. Deputy President, if you have some land that is idle, like we spoke about before, you can make good dollars. They have been renting for at least $1,000 an acre per year. So you have a 20 or 30 acres of land that is unproductive at the moment. You don't do anything else but sign a document. They take a lease agreement for at least 5 years in the first instance, and bam. You can see $100,000 coming into your hand in 5 years' time for leasing your land to CaneCo. But we had local people who could have done the same thing. There are some people who have been complaining, Mr. Senator for Agriculture, that they are coming and take all the lands and plant cane. And I know, I've heard it myself, especially from the Cocoa Association. This is something that you have to talk about. Yeah, we're going back to slavery. We're planting cane again. Over 150 people are presently employed. And labor must be glad for that. So you must help us sell it and say, this is not a bad thing for Grenada. It is providing jobs and ensuring livelihoods for people. So, Mr. Deputy President, Mr. Deputy President, I know it's Christmas, you know, but I find these senators behaving as though they're on vacation already. We're talking infrastructure, 41.6% of the capital budget, 10.8% of the overall budget, $133.7 million. So I hear about nothing, Senator Noel, that there's a clandestine move to ensure that St. Andrews get nothing. Your good friend and neighbor, who is the senator for Labour, you ain't see the sign he make, he say, you go and you eat glasses, because you look like you could see too well. Because, Senator, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there has been so much happening. Mr. Deputy President, so much happening. The same CaneCo that I just made mention of had built $1 million well, not million, millions of dollars, multi-million-dollar factory, right there in Conference in St. Andrews, not too far from the home of the, the Senator for Agriculture. A very good thing for him. He's getting all the fumes. So he ain't not to buy it again. He has to buy it. Multi-million-dollar waste treatment plant. A mill that can crush over 300 tons of cane in any one day. But you know what is also interesting? Because there's a lot of concern about youth and young people not getting jobs and being trained. There are 4 distillers employed, Mr. Deputy President, with that company, presently distilling rum. 1, graduates from St. George's University, all 4 of them. But secondly, and more importantly, all female, Mr. Deputy President. All female. Mr. Deputy President, we come a little lower down. Paradise, right in Progress Park. $2+ million. The construction of the Paradise Preschool. Soon to be completed in the parish of St. Andrews. A little way up the road, Mount Horn. The most modern day nursery and child development center completed in St. Andrews. Soon to start in 2021. The construction of 2 schools, Anglican Primary, and of course, in the village of Pearls, which I'm very proud about, not very far from my dear Senator's home, Senator on the other side, Sincere. The construction of the Grenville, or the Grenada, Christian Academy. Brand new school. A project that was in train since my time as the representative. And I'm happy that I was able to secure the lands then for that construction. Because at one time, when it looked as though we were unable to find lands in the vicinity, in the community, within the village, there was consideration of moving that school to another area. And as the representative then, I said, no, it will be a travesty if that school has to move from Pearls, which is still a slightly underdeveloped and impoverished village, and at a secondary school with modern labs and library, where the community may have the opportunity on an afternoon to utilize, will definitely make a difference to the people in that community in years to come. So we ensured that we found lands, and pretty soon, construction of that school. So I just wanted the Honorable Senator to realize, in case he was unaware, things are happening. Maybe not everything that you want, but things are happening. Millions are being spent. The Minister for Infrastructure did say, within the budgetary allocation that they have for the capital budget under infrastructure, that there will be some more work and repairs done to the Grenville bus terminus, which would bring it up to standard and to where we want it to be. Yes? There will be the construction of the commercial complex that would house all ministries that government has operating within St. Andrews. But more importantly, will be a revenue generator for government, because that will be something that will go under a similar, I think it's like a bolt operation, where, no, it's not a bolt operation, but they have had an anchor tenant, which we understand have already confirmed to be taking the first floor to make sure that government will also be generating. Not only will they save money from not having to rent facilities around Grenville and to free up some of those facilities that they are utilizing for private sector investment. But more importantly, we have heard, and rightly so, that there should be some consideration, Mr. Deputy President, some consideration for women, and that the jobs that will come in under infrastructure will be mainly men. And maybe so, yes. There are some women these days getting into construction and doing very well. Doing very well. And we need to encourage more of them. Yes, it's a small amount for now. But, you know, we also have to admit that in the academics, the women are doing far better, and we are becoming an endangered species in that area. So we need to kind of strike a balance. Bring a few of them more into construction and a few of the men into construction. And hence the reason the Empower program under the Ministry of Youth is so critical and important, my dear Senator. Because we have to try to strike that balance. You know? Get some more of our young men into the academic side and doing some of the things that they need to do. But, Mr. Deputy President, this is going to be the engine that is going to push a lot of the other things. The agricultural feeder roads is going to make sure that more of our farmers can bring in inputs into the land and take out what is needed. But having just said that, I just want to mention one thing. It would be remiss of me if I don't do that. I believe there is a misconception, Mr. Deputy President. I keep hearing that COVID has exposed us, as it relates to agriculture, to see that we should produce more and what have you. Some people have been saying that. And then there's another school of thought that says, well, as a result of the lockdown and people losing their jobs, a lot more people went into the land, and we have seen increased production. Maybe more people went into the land. But I firmly believe there have not been any significant increase in agricultural production. What we saw is a number of people on the street, in the villages, because they couldn't come into the town, into the market as they normally would, having to set up the little booths or table and an umbrella to sell their produce. But more importantly, and it shows definitely now why it is so important, that even though tourism is fickle and very fragile, when anything happens on the world stage that would affect our tourism, it would also affect agriculture. Because normally, Mr. Deputy President, half of what we saw on the streets immediately after COVID would have gone directly to the hotels and would have been consumed by SGU. And I know that for a fact, because I have friends who are into farming and they've said, listen, we planted a lot of watermelon, we planted a lot of cantaloupes. We harvested our bananas because we know generally around this time, coming up to the festive season, the carnival and so, we definitely get sale by the influx of foreigners coming here. Hotels locked down, little or no sale. Because we have to be factual. While we continue to encourage our people to grow more, and we talk about it local, let's remember, charity begins at home. Our local people have a preference for what is foreign more than what is local. And until and unless we are able to put a campaign in place, and more of us speak together and encourage our people to eat more. And leadership here, and I do agree with you, does not only mean government. Leadership means you, it means me, it means any one of us that will get people to listen to us. Any one of us that has a following. The PRG had good leadership, but there was a lot of fear too. Let's not forget that. So people had to agree and do certain things. Mr. Deputy President, we move on. We move on. So much. Yes, 10 minutes, sir? 15 minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, boy, it's running fast. I want to touch quickly. There's so much, and, you know, Mr. Deputy President, is a pity nobody left a little thing back. Everybody took all the time. So I can't get no bonus. Only Senator Garway yesterday got bonus. He talk about the bonus. I just... Let me just quickly mention a project that government is moving into, and I just want to say a few words on it. Something that I believe is critical, very important, but I want to give a word of caution. In this year's budgetary allocation, we saw that the Ministry of Housing and Social Development got an increase. Absolutely important. Housing is a critical issue. While we have to concentrate on so many other things, health and education, and they are all important, housing is one of the vexing problems that we have in Grenada. And I must commend this administration. Mr. Deputy President, they have done quite well. We have within the Ministry of Housing that housing program. It's called the House Repair Program, yes. And that's what it means. The name means it, house repair. A lot of our underprivileged, a lot of our low-income people, even some who are no income, will benefit from that. But the demands are always more than what the allocation can afford. There has been an increase this year, and I'm grateful for that. There are several other social programs that assist our people. We talk about the SEED program, which helps not just senior folks, and some people say it's a pension, it's really not. It's an assistance. It's a public assistance for those most in need. Complain that it should be more? I do agree that it should be more, because sometimes what some of these people get is all they depend on. But there are a few things I just want to say quickly about that. We also did, and the evidence is there, Grenada Housing Authority. They have moved from a position under this administration where they were red, no money, had to depend on heavy borrowing and loans and all kind of things to survive, to the point now where they are doing well, that they can, if demanded, because they are a parasitical organization, pay dividends to the government at this time. They're doing well. And as a result of that, Mr. Deputy President, they have been able to provide hundreds of loans for middle-income people, up to $30,000 on a monthly basis, to do repairs, to do renovation, to do addition and modernization of their homes. But they also have another program that is doing extremely well, where lands that government has vested in them, they will go on and sell it to people who have the funding to buy it, or if you cannot buy cash up front, they are going to build for you on those lands, and you take a mortgage with them, which you pay monthly, and you can now become the owner of house and land. And that is open to all the public servants as well, my honorable Senator for Labour. Many of them do take advantage of it. But I want to mention also that with the concurrence of government, the GDB, Mr. Deputy President, has over the last couple of years been doing a fantastic job. Government has helped in negotiating for them to receive a loan of some $9 million from the Eastern Caribbean Home Mortgage Bank, which they on-lend with very special conditions, first and foremost for public servants. They will get 100% financing. There is no limit. The only thing that will limit you to the amount is what salary you have, your ability to repay. They have now extended it out to the public. But that's not all. They have so far, because of the arrangement that this government has put in place with Petrocarib, received $25 million from Petrocarib for the same purpose, and to date has disbursed 25 plus $9 million. I don't good in math, so I'll go check that. That's 30 how much? That's not 34 million. Yeah? Big money. Okay, my dear, that is big money. Again, to assist with the housing problem. We don't want to go into the Chinese housing. We know what is happening, 664, 34, something, soon to be rolled out all in the new year. What is important is that when this government renegotiated with the Chinese for a low-income house after Hurricane Ivan, we negotiated for 2,000. That 6-something would just be the completion of the first 1,000. So our people, your people in agriculture, Senator St. Clair, your people in Labour, Senator Lewis, can look forward from 2021 onwards, not only to receive what is presently done, but can see as long as we can fulfill our side of the bargain, providing the lands and the infrastructure, meaning roads, electricity, and water to the site, for 1,000 more of those units to be built. A government that cares and concerned about its people. So what we see in the budget is, and when we say that what's in the budget is not all, we mean that. $5 million, Mr. Deputy President, for the pit latrine eradication program. We talk about health, public sector health. We talk about environmental health. What can be better than after a person who worked hard was not able to put away much, and that's something we had to talk about under the social programs, advice that I want to give. And you are in a state now where you're not as strong as you used to be before, and the state can help you put a bathroom and toilet to your little home to help you feel more dignified. This is what we're saying despite of what is happening, and I do agree with you that the public servants of this country need more for the moral. They need to get the 4%, and they will get the 4%. But we cannot, Mr. Deputy President, forget the fact that there are others who do not have people like you, Senator Lewis, to speak on their behalf and to demand that they be paid because they have no pay to get, and they need some service. You know, they say democracy and integrity need no promotion. When you do it for the right purpose, you just do it and leave it there. Mr. Deputy Speaker, $2 million, a new initiative for single-headed homes, which we all know most of the times are headed by the female. There are a few that you have a few male-headed that are single. I don't like the idea, though. I don't like the wording, single-headed home. That's what it's called. And I'll tell you why I don't like it. I honestly believe that the government has listened. I honestly believe that the drafters of the budget, those who went out and have the consultation, they heard the appeal, that they recognize that in these COVID years times, in a time when earnings has been lost, when some people who were once employed has become unemployed, the difficulty to take care of the family is something that government needed to look into. My only caution, like I want to caution about the other social programs, is that we do not continue to feed into a dependency syndrome. I totally support that program. I totally agree with it. However, I believe the criteria for how you get in must be strong, must be well put together, but in addition, that we don't end up having to hear the senators on the other side complain about the exit strategy for it. Because we do not want people to start believing that this is going to be there forever. We do not want people to start getting the idea that now I can settle, because whatever the amount may be, I don't know if that has been computed yet, that I can just sit back, relax, and wait. I believe we need to start teaching our people how they must plan for retirement. So I absolutely believe that retirement planning, whether it is in the fisheries industry, whether it is in the farming industry, wherever it is something that is absolutely necessary and important. That the trade unions must come on board, that other organizations, that associations like Nutmeg and Cocoa must come on board and talk to the farmers about it, that we can coordinate that. Because for too long, a lot of us do what we have to do while we are up, we are strong, and make no mistake, there are some disparities. There are those who earn more than others, there are those who have the affordability more than others, there are those who can save and put aside more than others. But everybody should at least know that a time and a day will come. The government knew. And that is why they had, in years when things was better, and Senator Lewis, I hope that will help you and others when next you have to negotiate for wage increase. Don't only talk about the surplus, but understand that a little surplus must always be there for in hard times like now. We can dip into it to ensure that we save jobs and continue to protect livelihoods. That's it, sir?
Yes, but I will give you a few more minutes to wrap up.
Mr. Deputy President, there's so much more that needs to be said. This budget is so rich, and there has been such rich debate from the other side. And there have been some misconceptions. And there's so many things that we need to rehash and talk about. So the fact that our goodly Senator Noel did indicate to us that he would have liked to see in a time like now, not only government talking about reaching out to collect unpaid taxes and what measures they would use, but he would have liked to see a drop in the rate of taxes. Commendable. Probably would help all of us. But in the same breath, is calling to see all of the main roads being repaired and wanting to see more happen for sports and wanting to see more investment for so many other things. There must be a balance. We have to remember that we only have a limited amount. And there may be a desire to have more in every other area. But we have to understand that only so much can be given from the cake when it's sliced, and that we have to make do, we have to work together, we have to ensure that there is greater implementation, that there is less wastage, and all of us have to take responsibility for that, and make sure that at the end of the day, those who need it most gets it, and do the best with it. Mr. Deputy President, I want to thank you. I want to thank all of my colleagues, and I want to thank the Prime Minister and others for the opportunity to return. And I do pledge that I hope my presence here for however long it will be one of value, and that I will be able to add to whatever is being discussed in this honorable house and ensure that Grenada as a whole benefits from whatever we do here. I also just like to say thank you to my family, my wife in particular, and the children. They had given me the concurrence to return here, because when I left mainstream politics, it was solely because my wife had some health problems, health issues. Thank God, she has had surgery. She's doing far better. And I appreciate and thank all those who help. And I don't know, Mr. Deputy President, are we going to be back here? If not, I just want to, we are going before Christmas. Tomorrow. Well, I don't know if I'd have a chance to talk again on the adjournment. Thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, Senator Bola. I can see your addition to the Senate have certainly improved the quality of debate in the Senate and brings a certain special historical context that some of us younger senators need to also be aware of. So I can tell you from listening to your speeches this afternoon that I've learned so much about what has happened and what the context and certain things are going to be. So as we move forward to tomorrow morning to start promptly at 9 o'clock, we still have 2 money bills to do and quarantine amendment bill, and we also have a motion in the name of Senator Cox to also go through and discuss and hopefully approve before we end tomorrow session. And we still have 2 more senators to debate tomorrow in full, and of course the mover of the motion to wrap up the debate on the budget. So we need to start promptly at 9, and hopefully we could get through hopefully by just after midday tomorrow afternoon. I know I will be challenged to stay beyond 12:01, so I know I start off the debate tomorrow on the other side, so hopefully my president will be back in his rightful place in the chair so that he can facilitate what I also have to contribute to the debate. With that being said, I want to thank all the senators for such a vibrant session this afternoon. I know none of us fell asleep, and we were all kept on our edge and our seats to hear what each party had to say from Labour, and of course, Senator Bola's maiden speech in the budget after such a long absence. I don't want to say it's very long, but a long absence. And I want to say a special thank you to Senator Bola's family for allowing him to come back to us and have such a good quality debate this afternoon. So with that said, senators, I now adjourn this session to 9 o'clock tomorrow morning promptly for a start to hopefully conclude our discussions on the budget and other matters. The Senate now stands adjourned.